This weekend, I got a photo pass to shoot the best tech death bands in the world. I'm going to show you my shots and tell you why they're the best. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, Jon Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's riff of the week. And this past Friday, July the 5th, was the first date, the kickoff of the 10th anniversary of Fallujah's Flesh Prevails. So they're doing a tour celebrating the 10th anniversary, and they're playing the Flesh Prevails in its entirety live. And you know, I'm super excited to see Fallujah live. I feel like this is a full circle moment would be the wrong way to put it, but Scott from Fallujah was the very first band that I interviewed on this podcast, and now that I've gotten into concert photography to get a chance to shoot them, I was super excited. Plus the whole, you know, the draw of it being the 10th anniversary of the Flesh Prevails, and they're playing the record from front to back live. That's also super exciting for me. But you know what? I really enjoyed the rest of the bill on this concert too. Let me tell you about it. So the first band up was Dawn of Ouroboros, which is a cool band name, a band that I'm not familiar with. I think maybe I've heard somebody mention them somewhere, but I'm not real familiar with them. So they come out on the stage, and right away it's moody music with the lead singer with her super long hair, like in this pose of, I don't know, it seemed to be channeling something. And I thought to myself, okay, this is going to be artsy. Like I feel like something magical is about to happen. I'm in for a treat. And even with that sort of positive expectations, they really impressed me even beyond those expectations. This was really spacey, almost proggy tech death. Really heavy, but also beautiful parts. And also it had sort of a, I don't know, like ecstatic black metal kind of influence. It definitely didn't have any shrieks or anything like that, but there was tremolo picking parts that seemed triumphant, but coming from an evil place. And then of course, just headbanging to go with it. And I was really impressed with Chelsea's vocals. The false chord screams were brutal. They rumbled through the PA. Most of the song she screamed, and so like I said, I was impressed from their set. So, you know, the next day while I'm editing photos, I decided to listen to their back catalog. And you know, you can't, when you first see a band live for the first time, you can't really appreciate the nuances of what they're doing in the music. On the recording, I can hear everything. So I listened to their last two albums, and yeah, there's a lot more ethereal clean singing on the albums. Live, they just did some ethereal clean singing, but mostly growls and roars. And I think that's probably smart. You know, you're the opening band, you've got 45 minutes, you know, the rest of the bill is crushers, you know, so yeah, come out with your hardest stuff. But the recordings, like, I think it's the perfect amount. It's mostly growling and screaming with some nice, spacey, dreamy sections where Chelsea also gets to show off her singing ability, and then the guitar players, they get to show off some of their compositional skills as far as melody. So yeah, I definitely think you should check out Dawn of Ouroboros if you're into the sort of spacey, magical sounding tech death. And if you came here because you like Fallujah, then that to me says that's the kind of music you like, and Dawn of Ouroboros will totally fit in with them. It was a great choice for this bill. All right, the second band up was Vulvodynia from South Africa. And I'm going to take a quick aside here before I talk about their live performance, which, by the way, was a killer live performance. But there was something that I noticed about this band that I think is really instructive about the music industry. So let's talk about that here. So for those of you listening audio only, you may not be aware of this. Those of you that are watching YouTube, you probably do know about this, but I do 2 shows a week. So today, Tuesday, is the podcast, and it's free on all platforms. You can get it pretty much anywhere where you can get podcasts. And then every Saturday, I do a YouTube exclusive show. You have to be watching me on YouTube to see it. And on that show, I do the same thing every weekend. I break down my favorite new metal albums that get released every Friday. Every Friday, I pick 5 albums. Those are my favorites, and that's the YouTube exclusive show that I do on the weekends. And on the very first segment of the show, before I do my top 5, I talk about the big bands that have album releases that week. And I do that for a number of reasons, one of which is so that I'm not only talking about big bands. Like if Metallica releases an album that week, obviously I'm going to talk about Metallica, but I don't want all those big bands to suck all the air out of the room. It gives me a way to talk about the other bands besides the ones that have all this popularity and major label support and all that good stuff. So with Metallica, I mean, they're the biggest band in the world. I don't really have to judge whether or not they're a big band or not. But then some other bands, it's like, how do I decide if they are a big band or if they are a small band that I'll include in the top 5 or that I'll talk about first? Well, one of the metrics I use is their monthly Spotify listeners. Now, it's not perfect, but it is a benchmark that I can use for every single band. I can look at every single band and compare apples to apples their numbers. You know, other metrics I would have to look in various different places, and it's not an A to A comparison. So I use Spotify monthly listeners. Now, this past Friday, I talked about Vulvodynia because they just dropped a new album, Into Benny, which is killer. And I put them in the big band category because they have 143,000 monthly Spotify listeners at the time of this recording. And that, for an extreme metal band, is a lot. I tend to think that a band above 50,000, especially as they start getting above 100,000, to me, that's a pretty big band. They're doing big things, and they are getting listeners from the entire, at least country, if not the world. They're getting listeners outside of their regional popularity if they have that many monthly Spotify listeners. It's when you get 100 and something thousand, it's obviously more than your parents and your local friend group that's listening to you. You've gotten on some sort of a playlist, you're getting pushed from major labels, that sort of thing. All right, so this bill that we saw on Friday, with that headliner being Fallujah, Vulvodynia, the second band out of four bands, has more monthly Spotify listeners than all 4 bands. Almost more than all 4 combined. Definitely more than the headliner. Fallujah is right at 50,000. Like I said, Vulvodynia has 143,000. So by that Spotify monthly listeners metric, they are the bigger band. Now, if you're like me, you've probably heard of Fallujah more than you've heard of Vulvodynia. And so that's where that you can't just judge a band by their monthly Spotify listeners. Now, the band is killer, and I'm going to get to that. They definitely deserve to have that many listeners. They've got that many listeners for a reason. I'm not saying that they're not good. I'm just saying other factors are involved. For instance, longtime listeners will know that one of my favorite new bands is Hath. And in 2021, when I named their album that year, All That Was Promised, it was 2022. In 2022, when I named their album All That Was Promised my album of the year, they were sitting at 30-something thousand, maybe close to 40,000 monthly Spotify listeners. And at the time of this recording, it's far less than that. And it's not that they've gotten worse or that they've been canceled or anything like that. It's just they haven't put out any new music in a while, and they're not constantly touring. So the hype has sort of died down a little bit, and that number that they're sitting at now, those are those true fans. That's me, somebody that listens to those records still on the regular. people that have put their favorite songs from that record on their playlist that they've made. That's the monthly Spotify listeners that they have now. Whereas Vulvodynia, they literally just dropped a record. They've been dropping singles that have videos on YouTube. So their numbers are going to get a small boost. Now, there's still a big difference between 140,000 and 50,000. So I feel that this band is only getting started, that they are on the rise, and they are definitely a band that you need to be watching out for. And this was only further solidified to me by their live performance. Now, on this weekend's Best New Metal show, where I talked about Vulvodynia's new record, I called them a technical deathcore band. And I think that's pretty accurate, but now that I've seen them live, I need to add the thing that I missed, and I saw this in their live performance, is they are also influenced by slam, and they slam hard. So hard. To me, they probably had the liveliest pit of the evening. Definitely the most violent, and I don't mean that like it wasn't a hardcore show. There wasn't any crowd killing, but just the velocity that kids were running into each other, the speed that the circle pit went around in circles in, and the whip of the headbanging just seemed more violent to me because the music was, like I said, slamming, and it was intense and unrelenting for pretty much the whole set. Whereas the other three bands had a lot of spacey and beautiful sections, and there was definitely some tech deathy, instrumental, show off how good of a musician section in Vulvodynia's set, but it wasn't beautiful. It was still intense and heavy. I definitely feel like live performance wise, this was probably the most entertaining band of the evening. Now, me being a big Fallujah fan and loving that music so much, I definitely got a little bit more out of Fallujah's set, but just judging purely on the headbanging, the intensity, the crowd work that the frontman did, the performance of the guitar players, Vulvodynia was active the entire set, and I really got to shout out one of their guitar players because y'all might remember a few episodes ago, I did that episode sort of criticizing metalcore bands for not really looking the part, not really looking like rock stars on stage. I don't want them to dress up like glam metal bands, or, I don't necessarily need them to have on corpse paint like a black metal show, be anything over the top like that. I just felt like some of those dudes looked like they just rolled off of the couch and just played guitar on stage with their baseball caps on and their, dad shoes. And I just feel like when you're going to get up on stage, it is a audio visual. I can just listen to the record at home if I only want the audio. People will say, well, it's all about the music. Image doesn't matter, man. Like, sure, at the end of the day, music is obviously the most important, but I'm at a live show. Like if my eyeballs don't matter, why do I need to look at them on the stage to begin with? Just put a curtain in front of the stage. So, but their guitar player, it's not for me, but he's wearing a watermelon jumpsuit and what appears to be Yeezys. I hate Crocs. I think they're an affront to humanity. But if you're going to wear shoes like that, the watermelon jumpsuit is the perfect accoutrement to go with some weird ass shoes like that. And my man had his own moves. I love when a musician has his own moves. I love the classics. I love a good headbang. I love a good circle bang. I love a good crab core walk. All the classics. I love it. Do it all. But certain musicians, they have their own moves on stage. And this guy had this like ska sort of dancing mixed with slam going on that I thought was so cool. the guitar player for Immolation. He has his own moves. When you see that guy on stage doing that weird sorcery that he does with his hands, nobody else moves like that on stage. And this guitar player for Vulvodynia, nobody moves like this guy either. It looked silly and fun, but also pretty kind of hardcore and heavy at the same time, which just seems like an impossible needle to thread. And lastly, let me just say before we move on to the third band, that Vulvodynia's singer, I'm probably going to mispronounce this because I'm very unfamiliar with South African names, but Lavandil, I apologize for that terrible pronunciation, but sir, your vocals are incredible. Just crushing all of us in the room. Definitely a key ingredient on how heavy the music was, especially the cadence. And so, like I said, I was impressed with the band. I went and looked them up, not only because of the show, but also, the Best New Metal Album show. I also was like, okay, who's this band with 143,000 monthly Spotify listeners? And I saw videos, and the guy was doing guitar playthroughs. So he obviously plays guitar in the band, but for this live performance, he didn't play guitar. He just sang. I don't know if they have 3 guitar players or if they brought on somebody to do the road with them. Also, the bass player told me later on in the night that this was his first tour with the band. So I'm wondering if it isn't a situation like I talked about several episodes ago. Remember I said that Septic Flesh, the full band, didn't come over because they're from Greece. And they're, one of their guys, he can't be coming to the United States and being gone for months on end. He's got obligations in Greece. I wonder if there's something like that going on with some of the members of this band in South Africa, and they had to hire mercenaries to come and do the tour. But regardless, their lead singer was only singing, not playing guitar. And I think that is key for these types of tech death bands. All 4 bands had a dedicated singer that didn't play guitar, which is semi-unusual in extreme metal. Usually, somebody plays guitar or bass. But when you have music that is this technical, in order for it to be an entertaining show, you really kind of need a dedicated front person, because a lot of the times the players have to concentrate because their parts are so demanding that they can't always be acting a fool on stage. So you've got a dedicated front person to engage with the audience, to headbang, to basically guide the proceedings. And my man, he's got it. He's got the goods. And speaking of bands that didn't have all of their members present, the third band up was Persefone. And I had heard of this band because I'm a big nerd and I love really proggy extreme metal, which this definitely fits. But this is a 6-member band and only 4 of them were present. 2 members weren't there, and it felt really odd to me that one of those members was the bass player. No bass player. That feels weird to me. So as you all know, I have been team tracks in the whole is it cool for bands to play with tracks debate that got kicked off by that whole falling in reverse situation that happened last year. I'm team tracks because I'm a Septic Flesh fan, and that's symphonic death metal. I do not expect that band to tour with an entire symphony. They would never make any money, and some of these venues aren't big enough to hold an entire symphony. So obviously Septic Flesh is going to play with tracks. And I can even get Persefone, they didn't bring their keyboard players, so I can get that being on tracks. And the vocal harmonies, I can definitely get that being on tracks. With a band like this, with such a rich and complex sound, so many different layers in the vocals, I definitely understand having tracks. And you have your live singer doing all the roaring and screaming, and then the harmonies in the background, sure, be on tracks, but it definitely felt weird to me for the bass to be on tracks. I don't know what their situation is, and I'm not judging or criticizing because we just talked about maybe their bass player. They're from a small country called Andorra, which I couldn't even tell you where that's out on a map. That's embarrassing for me to say. I'm supposed to be the heavy metal philosophy guy, but I don't know where Andorra is. But it's a small country, and maybe the bass player has commitments in Andorra and could not possibly commit to being in the United States for months on end for this tour. But you don't want to deprive your bandmates of a great opportunity, touring with Fallujah in the United States. So you don't want to hold your bandmates back. So you have to adapt, and maybe it's better to play with tracks than to hire a mercenary, because it's already hard enough to make money on the road playing extreme metal. But boy, I feel weird saying that, because, where do you draw the line? Can you just have the singer come out and play the tracks? That to me would be unacceptable. I don't think the audience would accept that at all. Just the singer and the guitar player, I also don't think that would be acceptable. You bring the drummer, now we're getting into acceptable territory. I do think that audiences will accept that. You bring both guitar players and it's less weird, especially with a band like this with such killer lead guitar playing, just absolutely screaming impressive guitar solos. I just loved it. So I don't know. It sounds like I'm knocking them. I don't want to knock them, but I do feel weird about that one. With all that said, they put on a hell of a performance, despite the fact that the stage looked kind of empty. There was a lot of space that there should have been a person standing there, and there wasn't. Before I go with Persefone and move on to the main event, Fallujah, I want to point out one other thing. I went to their merch booth because, like I said, I enjoyed myself. And I feel really privileged to get a photo pass. So anytime I enjoy a band, I make it a point to buy their merch, because I feel like I'm kind of getting a free ride a little bit with the whole photo pass thing. So this is my way to still support the bands, to buy merch. I want them to make money doing this thing. So I went to the merch table, and they've got books on the merch table. And you see your boy has a problem with books. I immediately was like, what's the deal with the books? And thankfully, their guitar player was running the merch booth, so it wasn't just some dude that worked for the venue. He told me, it's like, okay, so I do art on the side as well, and my art is in this book. And I was like, I have to have it. That's so cool. I have to have it. And then the internet wouldn't work on his device to take my card, and he's like, well, you can do cash. I'm like, no, brother, this is Atlanta. I don't carry cash. No, sir. So I really feel I missed out on that one. I think I need to find this book online and order it, because I do want to support Persefone. They put on a fantastic show, and when a band has their own book of art, basically my three favorite things: extreme metal, art, and books. I need this. I need to buy this. And then the headliners came on, and to say I was excited is an understatement. I actually kind of had a hard time doing my job, because I kept just wanting to watch Scott play his guitar parts. I just am so impressed with his guitar playing, and I would find myself sometimes watching him, and there'd be something cool going on stage over here. I'm like, oh, I need to go over there and get a photo of this. But I'm just so enamored with Scott's playing. I just wanted to sweat the technique. His precision, a lot of his playing is done with the whammy bar, which gives it that, soaring, adventurous sound. It's not just a matter of the way he frets and his picking technique. It's also the whammy bar, and live, it still sounds so clean and so pristine. They're playing The Flesh Prevails, and it sounds, at least those lead guitar parts sound like the record. Just beyond impressed. So we talked about earlier Vulvodynia having basically 3 times as many monthly Spotify listeners. So by that metric, they're the bigger band. But I mean, Fallujah is the more important band. I would argue they're more important to the genre of tech death. They've contributed more. They've been around longer. And also, you know, maybe in America, they're a bigger band. That's the part that the monthly Spotify listeners thing can't really tell you. So for instance, one of the biggest bands right now is Knocked Loose. And if you listen to interviews with them, they will say that they are still building their audience in Europe. When they tour in Europe, they play smaller venues. So maybe that's the case with Vulvodynia too. Maybe they have a bigger international audience, but America is still learning about this basically new band. Whereas Fallujah, we're familiar with Fallujah. They've been around for, 15 years or something like that. They've put out many like landmark records, and their last record, Empyrean, was, critically just a darling, especially from this outlet, a 9 out of 10. So I feel like Fallujah definitely should be the headliner. They definitely were the draw. Most people in the audience were wearing Fallujah shirts, although I did see a Vulvodynia shirt. And by the way, speaking of Fallujah shirts, look at this. Look at this. Merch game is strong. I love the devil worshiping kitty cat Fallujah shirt. Normally, when I'm at a live show, I want the tour shirt. I want the shirt that they designed specifically for that tour, and it won't be available anywhere else. And it's got the list of dates on the back. That's my preference. I prefer a tour shirt versus something that I could just buy off of their website. But I mean, when you see the devil worshiping kitty cats, I gotta have it. Plus, I don't have enough neon green in my collection. So anyway, merch not so important, even though I got a flag too and a patch. Fallujah's merch game super strong. The show did not disappoint me at all. The band put on such a stellar performance, and the new singer is just a beast. Just crushed that. I'm impressed not only with his skill, but he wasn't in the band for The Flesh Prevails, and he's got to do all this old music from beginning to end. And he even had a solo section, because there's that one section in the middle, maybe more towards the end of the record, where it's it's not so much guitars, it's more spacey and vocals. So it's just him on the stage by himself performing that vocal duty, and he killed it. He absolutely killed it. And then the band comes back out and beats our faces in some more. While the rest of the audience is getting their face beat in by all the heaviness, I'm still nerding out looking at Scott playing these incredible leads. And also the bass player's a beautiful, beautiful man. I was also enamored by his good looks. I like girls, but I also appreciate a beautiful man. I try to be one myself, but some dudes just got it. This guy's got it. Don't want to do anything with him. Just enjoy looking at him. Do you, sir. Now, I will say, I don't think that's Evan. Their bass player, Evan, I don't think that was him. And I wonder if also it was a case of somebody having other commitments, because, these days it's hard to make money. So a lot of musicians are in multiple bands at once. Evan is an in-demand bass player. I don't know if he had another commitment, so they had to hire a mercenary. But hey, Scott was there, Kyle was there. It sounded like Fallujah, and that is definitely one off the checklist for me. I'm real happy that I got to shoot that one. I don't feel these are my best shots, but I do have a couple that I'm like, yeah, this is satisfactory. I like this shot, and I will now have them forever on my website, HeavyMetalPhilosophy.com, and I'll always be able to remember this experience where I got to be right there in front of the stage taking photos of one of my favorite tech death bands. And at the beginning of this episode, I said they're the best tech death band. And I know that some people would argue with me. Maybe they prefer a much more speedy tech death band like maybe Arcspire. And don't get me wrong, Arcspire rules, especially if you like everything a million miles an hour and super impressive. But I like Fallujah because of the room to breathe that it has, and the atmosphere, and the soaring guitar solos that don't have to be a million miles an hour. But then sometimes he does shred, and then other times it's just the vibe. No other tech death band has the vibes, the watery, nebulous, beautiful vibes. Kyle is just screaming and is rumbling through the speakers, and it's the most crushing death metal you ever heard. And in the background is just this beauty, this compositional magnificence. So to me, that makes Fallujah my favorite tech death band. And therefore, it should probably have already been obvious, The Flesh Prevails will be this week's riff of the week. But before that plays, as the credits roll to this episode, I mentioned earlier that every weekend I break down the top 5 best new metal albums that drop every Friday. So if you're on YouTube and you want to check that out, just click right here. If you're listening audio only, links in the description. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I